Ray had never liked traveling through alien stations, but orders were orders, and as a junior envoy, he had to follow the chain of command even if it meant stepping into places where humans were barely tolerated. Station Virex was cold in a way that went beyond temperature. The walls pulsed with strange energy patterns, and the air always smelled like burning metal mixed with old books. Strange voices echoed from deep tunnels, and the security drones floated too close like they were always watching him breathe. His team had stopped near one of the observation domes, where diplomats were supposed to wait for the next delegation, but Ray had always been too curious for his own good, and when he saw a narrow hallway flickering with red warning lights and a slightly open door that didn't seem guarded, he made the kind of decision that often ends badly for humans in alien places. He slipped through, hoping just to see something interesting, maybe even take a private image to show back home, but what he found was far from anything he expected. The room was circular, wide open and silent, like a crypt deep underground. The floor was smooth and black with faint carvings glowing under his boots, symbols he didn't recognize but felt like they meant something important. At the center stood a platform with a floating suit suspended above it, metallic dark silver with streaks of red light crawling slowly over its surface. Like veins of lava, the suit looked old but alive, and somehow more than just a machine. It had arms, legs, a helmet shaped like a sharp beak, and shoulder plates like wings folded inward. Ray stepped closer, and the room responded. Lights, shifting walls, humming. Something in the suit reacted, and the veins of light pulsed brighter. He should have backed away. He should have called the others, but instead he reached out like something pulled his hand forward, and the moment his fingers touched the surface, the suit opened with a low whisper, not like metal moving, but like something breathing slowly for the first time in years. Didn't remember putting it on. The suit wrapped around him in seconds, sealing itself without pain or force. It fit perfectly, like it had been made just for him, and the moment it was fully connected, a flash ran through his head. Voices, images, symbols he couldn't understand but somehow felt, and then silence. Alarms rang out instantly across the station. Heavy red lights filled the corridor outside, and mechanical voices shouted in languages Ray had only half learned. He could hear the chaos rising, soldiers shouting, creatures scrambling outside the door that now refused to open. The suit had sealed him in, but he could see everything through the visor, which displayed strange alien code in front of his eyes, adjusting every second, reading the environment, calculating probabilities, scanning threats, and even displaying heartbeats of people outside. Ray tried to speak, but no words came, only thoughts the suit responded to. Thought. His movements were lighter, more powerful, his senses sharp, like he could hear through walls and feel vibrations in the floor. He moved to the center of the room and raised one hand without knowing why. The door slid open by itself. Dozens of guards stood ready outside, weapons aimed, claws and tentacles, tense armor glinting under station lights, but none of them fired. Not at first. They froze when they saw the suit. Fear spread like wildfire across the hallway. One alien dropped his rifle and whispered a word Ray didn't know, yet the suit translated it in his head. Voidframia. Tall alien with long horns stepped forward, barking orders to stand down, but his voice shook. Ray took one step forward, and every weapon in the hallway locked onto him. He raised both hands slowly, not to fight, just to show he meant no harm. But the suit interpreted the situation differently. Without firing a single shot, the hallway lights flickered. All weapons melted in the hands of their owners, twisted like soft wax under sunlight. Armor cracked, energy shields failed, and systems crashed in seconds. Ray stood untouched in the middle, while everyone around him fell to the ground, gasping, afraid, crawling backward from the suit that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. The Council had buried the void frame centuries ago. It was a weapon of judgment, created by a long-forgotten race that had tried to rebel against the laws of the galaxy and had been wiped from history. The suit was sealed in this place, hidden, locked, buried, and protected with layered codes, so only the blood of the creators or something very close could ever awaken it. And now it had bonded with a human. Ray had no idea what he had just done. He didn't even know what The void frame was only that everyone around him now looked at him not like a man in trouble, but like a ghost of something ancient and deadly back. At the observation dome, his team saw the news spread across station screens, security feeds showing Ray walking calmly in the hallway surrounded by unconscious guards and scrambled systems. Council alarms blaring warnings messages. Sent across channels and languages from all corners of the galaxy, the humans in the group stared in disbelief, knowing instantly that this was bigger than any diplomatic mission. This was the beginning of something no one had prepared for on the upper level of the station. Council watchers convened around a table of light, arguing, screaming, questioning how a human had unlocked the void frame, a suit that had once brought empires to their knees centuries ago. It had vanished and now a human wore it like it was his birthright. Ray didn't run, he couldn't. The suit had linked with his mind, and it was learning him, adjusting, scanning, measuring. It didn't want to hurt anyone, it had only acted when it sensed threat. Now it was silent, waiting, as if asking what Ray wanted to do next, and Ray didn't know yet. He just knew that everything had changed the moment the suit chose him. The station no longer saw him as a man, but as a storm in human skin, and the galaxy was about to decide whether to fear him or follow him, because something deep had awakened in the dark, something that remembered justice, not politics, something that had waited for a voice strong enough to speak again, and it had found that voice in a quiet, curious human named Ray. Ray stood silently in the wide corridor of Station Varex as emergency shutters sealed off distant wings and warning sirens echoed like angry whispers from the walls. The void frame suit clung to him as if it had become part of his skin, not heavy, not painful, but present, alive, and always listening. It moved with him faster than instinct. Every slight gesture became smooth, every sense sharper than anything he had known before. Council drones appeared in the air above him, trying to scan the suit, but their sensors failed one after another. Sparks flew, and systems crashed when they came too close. The suit didn't attack, it simply rejected them. It was defending him without violence, but with authority, a silent message that no one dared ignore. He tried to speak to the soldiers that stood around him, now more heavily armed than before, but his words came through, filtered through the suit's internal systems, translated, and sent out with a calm, neutral tone. He told them he didn't understand what was happening. He didn't mean to trigger anything. He only touched the suit, and it reacted. He asked them to contact his team or someone from human command, but their eyes stayed locked on the glowing lines of his armor hands, tight on triggers, waiting for an order they didn't want to follow. Then the order came from the highest level of the council. A message broadcast directly to all security forces on the station and beyond. The human wearing the void frame is to be contained immediately by any means necessary. Capture is preferred. Elimination is authorized. If containment fails, Ray felt it like a cold ripple running through his body, not the fear of death, but the shift in how the galaxy now saw him. Not a visitor, not a diplomat, not even a man, but an anomaly, a living threat, a mistake in the system that had to be erased. The suit reacted to his rising stress with a hum of energy across its limbs, data flowing across the visor in front of his eyes. It displayed exit routes, heat signatures of every soldier near him, threat levels, movement speed, air pressure, even the shallow breath of the nearest alien, all calculated in perfect silence, as if the suit had done this 1,000 times before. Ray didn't want to hurt anyone. He raised his hands again, stepped backward slowly, showing that he wasn't looking for a fight. But the moment his heel touched the shadow line near the wall, the guards opened fire. Beams of energy crossed the air, aimed directly at his chest and head, but nothing reached him. The void frame shifted around his body, absorbing the shots, turning the light into harmless static that danced for a moment before fading into the air. The soldiers panicked more than before. Some tried to run, others dropped weapons, and the few that stayed fired again and again, only to watch their efforts melt into nothing. The suit didn't strike back. It didn't need to. Its defense was enough to turn warriors into statues of fear. Ray moved quickly but carefully through the chaos, heading for the lower levels. Where he remembered the station's human quarters were located, he needed to find anyone who could help him explain that he hadn't done this on purpose, but every step he took made more systems react. Doors locked behind him, lights followed his movement, and the station began sealing him off one hallway at a time, as if the building itself feared what he had become. When he reached the transport shaft, the lift had already been disabled, but the suit scanned it, recalculated, and projected a path through the maintenance rails on the side. It gave him options, showed him physical movement data, even hinted at how much force he needed to jump between levels without injury. Ray followed the guidance without questioning how or why he trusted it, not because he understood it, but because the suit hadn't let him fall yet. As he climbed through narrow shafts, alarms continued to spread far beyond the station. Other worlds were now watching the incident through emergency feeds from Varek's word was spreading fast across the galaxy. A human had bonded with the ancient Forbidden's void frame, the last of the Judgment-class suits from the Lost Builders of Justice, the ones the Council had long erased from history. Some leaders demanded immediate military action, calling Ray a walking weapon, a risk too dangerous to tolerate. Others hesitated, speaking in quiet tones about prophecy, about ancient warnings, about the return of balance that the Builders once promised. And among the Human Alliance, confusion turned to concern as debates sparked in underground channels. Was Ray a hero or a danger? Did he awaken something holy or simply break something that was better left buried? Meanwhile, deep within the suit, Ray began to hear it again. A voice, not loud, not strange, not alien, but calm like wind in trees, soft and still. The suit spoke through thought, not language. It sent him memories, brief glimpses, not his own visions of vast cities in the stars, burned not by war but betrayal, species begging for help, then falling silent, a court of lies, sentencing creators of the void frame to extinction, not because of violence, but because of fear. Ray felt a weight in his chest, not physical, not emotional, but something deeper, the realization that this suit wasn't a weapon of war. It had been built for something greater. Justice, not revenge. Clarity, not conquest. It was never meant to destroy, but to stand between the powerful and the powerless, a voice that could not be bought or broken. And now it had chosen him. Back on the station, soldiers regrouped under direct Council command, reinforced with robotic units and plasma drones. Ray reached the maintenance tunnels near the human quarter, where familiar voices called his name. Through static-filled comms, his team was trying to reach him, some defending him, others ordered to step aside, their hands tied by protocol and fear. Ray stood there in the half-darkness of the tunnel, unsure of what to do next. The suit waited with him, not pushing, not guiding, just listening. His heart was steady, his mind clearer than it had ever been, and yet everything felt like it was spinning faster than he could stop. He was no longer just a man, he had become something more, something the galaxy hadn't seen in generations. And though he didn't ask for this, he knew there was no going back now. Every eye in the stars was watching, every ruler wondering what he would do next, and the suit inside his mind asked only one thing: do you wish to run, or do you wish to speak? And Ray answered not with words, but by stepping forward into the light where fear waited and history was ready to turn once again. Station trembled under the weight of tension and whispers as Ray moved through the dim corridors that stretched like veins toward the heart of the structure. He could feel the change, not just in the way soldiers stepped aside or how cameras tilted away when he passed, but in something deeper. The very systems of the station began treating him differently, unlocking doors, slowing barriers, adjusting environmental controls, as if recognizing something beyond orders, beyond protocol, beyond fear. Ray followed the tunnel that led to the old archive chamber, a place few visited, now dusty and layered with forgotten codes, old records from civilizations lost or erased long before humans entered the galactic map. He felt drawn to that place by a pull, not physical, but planted within the core of the suit. The void frame guided him, not with commands, but subtle intent, like memory returning to itself. Chamber was cold and quiet, and filled with data crystals floating in pale blue light. Nothing About the room seemed dangerous, yet the air was thick with the weight of history and hidden truth. The moment Ray stepped inside the room, shifted slightly, lights blinked in recognition. Ancient files unlocked and a terminal activated without touch, displaying language that rewrote itself into words he could understand. A figure emerged from the shadows of the chamber, old, bent, wrapped in layers of worn fabric, skin wrinkled and dry, eyes sharp with knowledge. The alien did not raise a weapon, nor call for help. Instead, he bowed slightly and introduced himself as Kale, once a historian, once a believer, once a witness to the fall of a forgotten race. Kale spoke slowly, each word shaped with purpose as he revealed the truth buried for centuries. The void frame was not designed to kill, it was never meant to dominate. It was a vessel created by a civilization that no longer existed, a race known simply as the Makers, who once stood as protectors of fairness and judgment across the stars. When the Council was still young and unsure, the Makers built machines like the void frame to serve as neutral eyes and voices, able to walk into any conflict without bias, able to end war not by violence, but by exposing the truth, the whole truth, without fear or filter. But the Council grew strong too quickly. Its leaders feared anything they could not control, and when the void frames began to uncover corruption among high ranks, when they refused to be silent, the order came not for revision, but for extinction. The Makers resisted not with armies, but with truth, and for that they were erased. Entire star systems burned not by war, but by decree, and the suits were scattered, locked, hidden beneath layers of silence. Ray listened without interruption. The suit remained still, its lights dim, its voice quiet as if mourning. As Kale continued, he explained that the void frame had remained dormant ever since its last wielder was betrayed by the Council, left to die in silence and shadows. The bonding process was believed to require something rare, a mind still unbroken by power, a heart not yet twisted by control, and Ray, a human from a young race untouched by old galactic politics, had been the first in generations to match that pattern outside the chamber. Events moved fast. The Council's upper members scrambled to respond as the footage of Ray's movements reached every corner of the known galaxy. News streams flashed with images of him walking, unharmed through weapons fire of systems, bending to his presence of alien guards, frozen not by command, but by fear. And across dozens of worlds, old stories were told again, whispered in temples, painted on broken walls, legends of the one who would wear the suit of light and shadow, who would speak when silence had lasted too long. Back on Earth, the human response was divided. Politicians called for containment. Some demanded surrender, others celebrated Ray's actions, calling him a sign that humans were no longer the youngest, weakest voice in the stars. And among the people, movements began quietly, messages of support, videos of hope, banners that read not destroyer not king, simply truth returns. Ray left the archive chamber without a word, thoughts heavy with everything he had seen. The suit pulsed gently with a warmth that felt like understanding, not control, and he walked not like a man running from a storm, but like someone becoming part of it. He reached the lower sector, where human quarters had been sealed off by Council orders, but the doors opened the moment he approached, and inside his old team waited, unsure, afraid, but still loyal. They stared at him not with hatred, but confusion. The same man stood before them, yet surrounded by power that none of them understood. His team leader stepped forward, voice low, asking what happened, what he planned, and Ray didn't give a speech. He only said that he found something meant to protect, not destroy, and that if the Council feared him, it was because it feared the truth. Not far from the station, a ship approached, silent, cloaked, hidden from standard scans. Its captain, a rogue signal broker named Laura, who had spent her life collecting pieces of Forbidden's tech, intercepted the station transmissions and realized what was unfolding. She didn't want war. She wanted to see it with her own eyes. The last of the void frames bonded to a human, as the legends had once warned. Meanwhile, within the Council chambers, chaos grew, not just from fear, but from division. Some believed Ray should be eliminated before he inspired rebellion. Others believed it was too late, that the suit's return would ignite fires in places Long thought buried, already reports came in of smaller species rising refusing council control, chanting the name of the one who now walked in judgment, not with armies but with truth. And in a quiet corner of the station, Ray stood before a window watching the stars, thinking not of war, not of glory, but of what came next. He did not ask to lead. But now he could not hide. The suit had chosen him. The galaxy had seen, and the fire of change had already been lit. He wondered how long before others followed, how long before the weight of silence gave way to something louder. Void frame pulsed once more in sync with his breath. Not a machine, not a curse, but a message waiting to be heard. The station had turned into a battleground of minds and decisions, even before the first weapon was fired. Ray moved through the upper decks, no longer hiding, no longer watched in silence, but tracked by eyes on every screen. Broadcast feeds across worlds followed his every step. The void frame suit remained wrapped around his body, not glowing bright, not raising weapons, only pulsing like a heart beating with memory and purpose. The walls around him whispered with static voices from hidden transmitters, silent debates behind locked doors, between those who wanted him stopped and those who feared what would happen if they tried inside. The suit, the quiet voice spoke again, not in words, not in commands, but in thoughts that blended with his own, like memories that were not his yet carried his weight. It showed him fragments of what the void frame had seen through centuries: betrayal of peace, the fall of the makers, the cries of the weak silenced in chambers that called themselves councils. And Ray understood. He was not just walking with power, he was walking inside history, buried alive under lies told so long ago that truth had turned into myth. He entered the central transit ring, where the council chamber waited behind walls reinforced with the strongest alloys in the galaxy, a place where no unauthorized being was allowed. Yet the doors unlocked with a whisper of light, as if recognizing him before he spoke. Guards surrounded the room, tall armored creatures with weapons drawn, but not fired. They did not blink, they did not speak, and their fear was heavier than the air. They breathed. Ray stepped forward, his voice steady, his face calm. Not angry, not proud, just filled with something deeper than either. He said he came not to destroy, but to speak. And the suit responded by projecting a signal through every system connected to the chamber. Every camera, every microphone, every screen across the star system turned black, then lit with the symbol of the void frame. And then Ray's voice echoed, not just in the chamber, but across ships, planets, homes, colonies, in 100 languages, spoken at once by the suit's internal translators. A voice clear and unshaken. He told them what he had learned, not just about the suit, but about the past, the erased truths of the makers, the silence that followed their extinction, the way the council twisted memory into obedience and made truth illegal in the name of unity. He told them void frame was not a weapon of war, it was built to speak when others could not, to walk into injustice and show it for what it was, without lies, without fear. And now it had returned, because enough silence had passed, and someone still had to listen. The chamber filled with rising voices. Council members shouted, called him a liar, a thief, an invader. Others watched in silence, uncertain. Some turned off their comms, others stayed frozen, unable to move as Ray continued. The suit then displayed what it had stored: hidden recordings, visual archives from the makers, entire histories wiped from the official records, proof of council crimes, hidden trials, messages of peace erased, messages of warning ignored. The galaxy watched in real time as the truth unfolded on every screen. Every voice that had been silenced now spoke again through Ray, through the void. Framaguards moved in fear, not to attack, but to retreat, their orders breaking down. Under the weight of what they saw, their hands lowered, their weapons fell to the floor one by one, and the chamber's light dimmed, as if the station itself bowed to something older than its walls, something older than control. Ray looked at the council members, one by one, not to accuse, but to remind them that silence would not save them anymore. He said he was not here to rule. He would not wear the crown they feared, because he was not chosen to lead armies or conquer planets. He was chosen to speak where truth had died, and now it had returned, not in warships, but in him, in one human who walked into a forgotten room and touched the memory of a race that never wanted to be God's only guardians. Outside, the chamber rebellion sparked not in fire, but in thought. Across planets long ruled by fear, people turned off council broadcasts and replayed Ray's message. They questioned orders, they remembered stories told in secret to children about watchers of justice. They tore down old flags, painted new ones. They stopped asking for change and started becoming it, not through destruction, but by standing together. And saying one word enough. The suit around Ray shifted slightly, the lights glowing softly, not with power but with peace. It had found balance. Again, not in weapons, but in words it had spoken through a human, and now it rested, no longer searching. No longer calling. It had found what it was made for, and Ray felt it in every breath. The end of silence, not the start of chaos. The rebirth of truth in a galaxy that had forgotten what truth sounded like. The council members left their seats, some fled, others wept, some surrendered not to him, but to the guilt that lived in their own memory. Their time had ended, not with an invasion, but with a whisper, and Ray walked out of the chamber, not as a soldier, not as a ruler, but as a witness carrying history that no longer needed hiding. He returned to the platform where he had first found the suit, the room unchanged, silent. And still the void frame released him slowly, the pieces folding back, floating in the air, like they had been waiting for him to finish what they could. Not the lights dimmed, and the suit rested again, not dead, not gone, but patient. Ray looked at it one last time, and whispered that it was time to let the galaxy decide its future, not through him, but through the truth he had shown. And he turned back toward the corridor, knowing the path ahead would not be easy, but at least it would be real. Suit pulsed once more before the chamber sealed itself behind him, and Ray walked away, leaving behind the machine that had once brought fear and now brought something else, something stronger than fear, the memory of justice. Galaxy had changed, not with thunder or invasion fleets, not with explosions or battleships, but with a voice that reminded everyone of what they had once promised to become before power drowned purpose and silence replaced truth. Ray was no longer on the station. He had left quietly without warning. As soon as the council doors had shut behind him, he had walked through the same tunnels where it all began, each step softer than before, each breath filled with something that was not fear and not pride, but understanding. He had returned the void frame to its chamber, without fanfare, without victory, without claiming it as a weapon or a crown. The suit now floated in silence once again, the lights within it dim but alive, as if waiting for the next time it might be needed, not for war, but for remembrance. Ray had made no demands, he had taken no position, offered no threat. He had only told the truth, and shown what had been hidden, and then stepped away. Across distant stars, the message still echoed. Systems that had once lived in quiet submission now stirred like rivers, breaking ice. Colonies that had bowed to the council without question now asked new ones, not with weapons, but with words. Some leaders resigned, not from shame what they had helped bury, others tried to cling to the past, but their voices cracked under the pressure of a million more rising in unison on Earth. The change came slowly, but clearly. Humans who had always been the newcomers, the observers, the ones learning from those who came before, now stood with a different light in their eyes. They were no longer the youngest, they were something else, something that had walked into the oldest secret in the galaxy, and walked out alive, not corrupted, not broken, but stronger than before. They spoke not of domination, but of balance, not of empire, but of courage. To remember. Ray did not return to politics. He refused the titles offered by some of the rising reformers. He did not join the human delegation when they were called to speak in the restructured council meetings. He had nothing left to prove. His name had already traveled farther than any ship, and his silence carried more meaning than speeches ever could. He chose instead a quiet station near the edge of a solar system, where light stretched thin across dark skies, where the stars looked closer and the noise of power could not reach. He lived among simple people, miners, engineers, explorers, young ones who had only heard fragments of what happened on Station Virex, but carried the spirit of it in their questions, in their refusal to accept what could not be explained in their hunger for stories that felt real. Ray taught them without preaching, answered without claiming anything, and in doing so passed on something stronger than commands. He passed on choice. The void frame remained untouched since the day it let go of Ray. Many tried to approach it. Many wondered if another could bond with it. But the chamber did not open again. The suit did not respond, and after time most stopped trying, not out of failure, but out of respect. It had spoken once, and that was enough for now. The galaxy would decide its own path. Small rebellions turned into honest negotiations. Isolated systems, long forgotten by the central rule, now formed new councils, not to mimic the old ones, but to build something more human in spirit and more universal in truth. Even the ancient species who had once feared the return of the void frame began to ask questions about themselves, what they had allowed, what they had ignored, what they might become if they dared to face it. The galaxy did not become perfect. Peace was not born in a day, but something greater began: the courage to change. Without permission, the fire to speak, even when history trembled at the sound. And in that shift, Ray's story became less about the suit and more about the choice to wear it when silence was safer, and the choice to leave it behind when the message had been heard. On one quiet evening, as light bent low across the curve of the outer planet, Ray stood watching the sky, no longer followed by drones, no longer chased by judgment. The air smelled like dust and metal. The wind carried the sound of a child laughing behind him, and in that moment, he felt what the void frame had felt when it first opened to him. Not fear, not anger, not power, just purpose, a reason to stand, a reason to keep walking, even when no one asked him. To the stars above him shifted as a slow comet passed across the upper sky, glowing with soft green light, and he thought of the makers, the ones who had built the suit not to rule but to protect, who had spoken with machines that understood justice better than any court, who had died not because they failed, but because they refused to betray their truth. And now through him, through one quiet decision, they had spoken again. He knew others would come, others would rise, others would wear symbols not for power, but for what they stood for. And when that happened, he hoped they would remember not his name, not his face, but the feeling that came when truth stood taller than fear, and choice became louder than command. The galaxy would continue turning, stars would continue burning, wars might still come, but somewhere deep in the systems of the universe, the void frame rested, not sleeping, not broken, simply waiting for a voice it could believe in again. And as long as that voice remained possible, Ray believed there was hope, because what they truly feared was never the suit, not the armor, not the old power it carried. They feared the idea that someone could wear all of that and still choose not to conquer, but to speak, not to destroy, but to remember. And that fear would now be their mirror, showing them what they had lost and what they might still become. And far beyond the noise of stars and shadows, the galaxy continued its slow awakening, not to a hero, not to a weapon, but to a truth that could no longer be buried, because one human had chosen to listen. The end.